We are on the air now. I'm Marc Charles. This is the Octagram, and I am joined in studio here at GLH Studios by Emmy award-winning TV host Jay Adams, no stranger to the Tampa scene. What's up, my man?
What's up? So glad that you're having me. I really appreciate it, and I already love Ybor City, and this is just a beautiful studio. First time I'm seeing it.
Welcome to the studio, Jay Adams.
Yeah.
You're no stranger to nice studios, Mr. NBC Sports, Mr. Hotshot, giving me your time of the day to come on my little itsy-bitsy radio show.
No, that is so not how it is. You are bringing it. I'm seeing you everywhere. You're on so many different platforms, and when people ask me, they say, "Who's the next up and coming Turk?" Your name is always in the mix because you're hungry, and there's, you know what? That's the intangible that no one can factor, the hunger. The older the guy gets, the longer he's been in the space, it's easy to get fat and sassy. You're hungry, and that's why you're working at all these different angles. So everybody keep your eyes out for Mr. Marc Charles.
Mr. Jay Adams is very, very kind of you to say, especially a man of your stature. Jay Adams, of course, for our listeners that weren't listening to the show a few weeks back when we had Jay on the show talking about the Florida Mixed Martial Arts Hall of Fame, which, by the way, you did a fantastic, amazing job hosting through the night, keeping things going, and quite frankly, a lot of fun. A little edgy at times, but we're not going to talk about that right this second. But definitely brought a little edge with you, but I loved it.
We went third rail a couple times,
a few times. We actually saw at least one person get escorted out, a little too much to drink for them.
Whoa. He was like some big pro wrestling guy. He was like 6'8", 300 pounds. And guess what? The world of MMA, he was actually the least dangerous guy in the room. That's the juxtaposition. Isn't that the strangest thing in the world? Any other universe, that guy is the one everyone's scared to have to kick out because he's too drunk. In our universe, in the MMA universe, he was actually the least dangerous guy in that room.
Can I be devil's advocate?
Absolutely.
His friend, which was who is actually somewhat polite and a nice guy, that was the pro wrestler. The guy that actually got kicked out.
Okay.
He's a catch wrestling coach. And he was, get this, right? He was in town and he was going to do a seminar the very next day. And only like 10% of the people showed up after that incident.
Really?
And he was very upset. And someone had to tell him, like, look, man, they were all coming. Everyone from that event, they were coming to your seminar today. But you know what? What you did was what you did.
Wow. Yeah, his friend, the pro wrestler, you're right. The dude was super respectful. He tracked me down at the end of the night and apologized. I said, you have nothing to apologize over, my man. You were actually trying to temper your boy. He was trying to talk him down. So, but he still did nonetheless. I was very impressed with that dude. And that dude is another guy like you. He's working the angles. He's not just fighting. He's working a lot of the other angles of the sport as well.
Yeah. Something about guys who are giving out little stickers at black tie events that I'm not sure about.
Hey man, he's working it.
He is working.
You know what? Give him props. He's getting his card out there, and
all the props in the world go to him, but it's time to step your game up a little bit.
I'm going to let him know you said that, okay?
All right, and with that said, we'll see you next week. So
that's a wrap, Joe.
Speaking of stepping up the game, this month coming up, we have a Conor McGregor fight, right? What coincides with that fight is that starting with UFC 257, which will headline Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier, the price of UFC pay-per-views on ESPN Plus is going up. So it's a sign of the times. It's also the sign of Conor McGregor fighting in front of no fans, I think. I think there's a little bit there where maybe the negotiations to get guys like Conor to fight when there isn't that gate money, there might be something there to try to make up some of that so they can get a guy like Conor. Because it's kind of interesting for us to even think that Conor McGregor, this world superstar, will be fighting in front of a no-fan event. And something that back in March that we would have thought, that's not going to happen. He's going to wait. Khabib's going to wait. These guys aren't going to fight in front of no fans. Well, Khabib fought in Abu Dhabi on one of the biggest cards in their history. And now we have Conor McGregor coming up in January, where he's going to be showing everyone that, hey, look, anybody, no matter how big you are, can do this. And the price of paper going up, just a couple numbers here. It's not a huge hike, but it is a hike indeed. It's going up about $5 for the pay-per-view, $64.99, going up to $69.99. And the ESPN Plus annual subscription going up $10. So from $49.99 to $59.99, which is a 20% hike. That's a lot. That's a lot of money. So Jay Adams, when you hear pay-per-views going up, you hear $70 for the pay-per-view. What comes to mind for you?
Wow. So much comes to mind, Mark. I guess the first thing out of the gate is they will get away with it. They will get away with it because they're the only game in town. They're so dominant in the space. They'll get away with it because so many of us are still cooped up in the house and don't have a ton of stuff to do. The card is compelling. The card actually justifies it to a large degree. But I will say this, despite the fact that everybody who's online complaining about these price hikes, and justifiably so, they're all going to come to the table eventually. They might not sign up until the last minute just to try to make Dana nervous and make William Morris even more nervous. But everyone's going to come to the table. But I do think that in terms of PR, it's a long-term negative for UFC. In that, I talk to my friends who still buy pay-per-views, and they're dwindling, frankly. They are dwindling because not only is it getting expensive because you have to be on 3 or 4 different platforms at the same time, it's confusing for the average Joe at home. I had one of my boys, and he's no slouch. He has a podcast, for goodness sakes. He's pretty technically competent. He's like, what do I can't get, is it ESPN? Well, I'm on ESPN, but now it's sending me over here. And is it a plus? And he finally figures out the whole ESPN plus, and the card's already starting, but he hasn't done the pay-per-view part yet. So the days of a simple turn on the TV and you have one cable subscription. Here's my money for the year. I turn on the TV and watch the whole card. What is really pissing people off is, Fight Pass will get you the first 5 fights. All right, there's $109 for the first 5 fights. ESPN Plus is going to get you the next 6 fights, okay? Right. And now you're going to do a pay-per-view of $70 to get the last 5 fights. It's not just the money after money after money, but it's the convoluted nature of the average guy doesn't know what platform to be on. And they'll get a Fight Pass thinking that's going to take care of everything because it's $109.
And it doesn't have anything on it.
It has shit on it. I'm sorry.
You're good.
Sorry. Oh, and you weren't going to edit. My bad. I apologize.
Just roll. Can you mark that for me?
So anyway, it has nothing on it. And it has, you go back to watch those fights later thinking, okay, at least I can watch, in replay. You don't get those for like 2 months. Because they're trying to get you to go on all their other platforms first. And so is the UFC Fight Pass a great move for the UFC? Heck yes. Think of how many hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I give them $110 every year. And that'll eventually be there. Let's face it, they'll kick ESPN to the curb eventually, like they kick all of their platforms to the curb. It's always going to be UFC. So down the road, when it makes financial sense, everything will be on Fight Pass and the money will go up. But
that said, they've made a mistake, in my opinion. They have been looking at ESPN, and when by they, I mean Dana White and the UFC, even with the Zuffa era, not just now, but since the Zuffa era. Dana White has had the biggest crush on ESPN. Dana White has been trying to go out with ESPN like I've been trying to go out with my girl for a long time. Like, I'm telling you, and when they finally lifted their skirt up just a little bit, Dana was right there. And, I'm happy for them. I'm glad they're on ESPN. It legitimizes the sport. It legitimizes the UFC, which I have a lot of passion for, and I support them. But I think what happened was they completely ignored the Fight Pass, which we talked about this off the air. You asked me, what are important platforms to you? Well, with that, I'll just pivot a little bit, and I'll say I think it's extremely important for someone like an organization like the UFC to build their own platform, because every deal comes up at some point. But when you own your own platform, you own it. So it's up to you how long, when it concludes or how it expands. So what I'm getting at, Jay, is the UFC should be building their own platform right now while their shows air on ESPN. But that UFC Fight Pass, starting 5 years ago, should have been the pay-per-view platform, because at the end of the day, you look at like the WWE, they have the WWE Network, and it started off a little bit rough, but that's probably the best thing that they ever did, because now they have this subscription base with millions of subscribers, and they've told all the pay-per-view companies where to go, because they realized that if they just kind of eat that for a little while, they're not going to make as much money because the pay-per-view revenue is gone. But now they're at a place now where they own their own platform. And it makes people like DirecTV and the pay-per-view providers, they were so upset. So Dana White looked at Vince McMahon when that happened, and he said, "What an idiot! He's crazy." He really said that. He's like, I don't know how he was able to do that. But when you're Dana White at that time, about 6 years ago, you have to look at the difference. Vince McMahon and WWE's pay-per-view model was dwindling. Dana White at that time, and still for the most part, was the king of pay-per-view. So it's very easy for Dana to look at WWE and say, that's crazy. How can they stop doing pay-per-view? They stopped doing it because they were already dying in pay-per-view, so they made that move. Dana's done a really good job with the UFC in keeping them very relevant with pay-per-view. So that's kind of why he stuck to what he stuck to the platform, the structure they have, where they keep the pay-per-views on Comcast and all those different providers. But they should have went with the Fight Pass. That's where the pay-per-view should be. And then that doesn't mean that they can't still work with ESPN. So I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I think what happened was ESPN was this hot chick that just completely distracted them from building their own brand. Now, I sound like a bit of a fool trying to tell Dana White how to run his business when he brought sports back this year before anybody else. He created the bubble. He showed NBA. He showed the MLB how to bring their organizations back. So I give him all the credit in the world with all the things that they do. I'm not trying to be naive and ignorant here, but I do strongly believe that Fight Pass was really their ticket to a future in this digital space.
Well, if I could play a little bit of devil's advocate there, and everything you said, I hear you. When you're selling your company, which the Fertitta brothers were doing, they have to demonstrate a certain amount of revenue, a certain amount of solid standing. They need to show everything's in the black, and they need to show a value. You have to determine a value, right? All these big accounting firms come in and they audit the books, and they need to see revenue. So, ESPN has distribution that is second to none, obviously. It's a Disney product, and they have the best distribution probably in the world. So I think, and I'm same as you, who am I to second guess Dana or even to guess what's going on behind the scenes? But from what it looks like on the surface, the move is to look very valuable in the marketplace to a potential suitor. And, he was trying to get multitudes of billions of dollars. So the revenue that a Disney product can generate versus a relatively unknown product, even though it's UFC, Fight Pass at the time was still kind of novel. And the functionality is still pretty pathetic, at least in my opinion. It's very counterintuitive, and the library is okay, but you can't get current stuff. So I'm not impressed, to be honest with you. I'm not impressed by it. So what better way to up the value of your company? If you're really selling and getting out, right, which the Fertitta brothers were, we're done. We want out. What better way to juice it, give it a shot in the arm, than to show hundreds of millions of dollars of licensing revenue, which is what a Disney brings to the table. ESPN brings to the table. And ESPN gives Disney the cover because Disney could never put a combat sports product on directly, right? Because all the families would be huge. So that's a bad move politically. So ESPN gives them great cover, right? And the ESPN Plus is a perfect model for that, as ESPN, is going into the streaming as well. So it's a great marriage in terms of distribution. You're going to get, getting half of 14 million versus getting maybe $1 million on Fight Pass in pay-per-view. So you're getting 7 million. You're showing your potential suitors a real strong partnership, an impressive high visibility partnership in a ESPN. And yeah, there is the star factor for Dana. He's a human being, and he gets the googly eyes just as much as the rest of us. And ESPN is the prestige. It's as prestigious as it gets. And you're right. He was starstruck.
Jay Adams here in the studio with me. You can see him on NBC Sports. He's an Emmy-nominated show host. And, of course, I'm just measly Marc Charles. Welcome to the show. Jay, you just outshine me in every way, man. I gotta step my game on. Let me put my mask on.
So not what it's about, man. You know that.
Jay Adams, let's talk about how the COVID era has affected this fight game. Starting back in March, well, that's really when it really started for us. But of course, starting in March, things shut down. So let's give a quick background here if I can, and we'll just get into it. But March 16th, ESPN, they announced that the UFC would cancel 3 events in response to the outbreak. The first couple of weeks of May, which was just a couple months later, Dana White and UFC were credited for bringing sports back on a professional level. UFC basically they perfected the professional sports bubble. And early shows in Jacksonville, Florida, where Florida and our governor opened up, and the mayor of Jacksonville opened up the state to the UFC to show them that this is a place that they could run events if they'd like, and they did it safely. A little bit of a dark show, if you ask me. It was televised, but if you take a look at those Jacksonville shows, very dark with just maybe like a spotlight on the cage, not much quality to the production compared to right now. Skip a couple months later, Fight Island's locked down, becomes the new mecca of the fight world, Abu Dhabi. The UFC Apex becomes the domestic home for UFC, stateside. Great production value there, looks awesome on TV. And in the first week of October, Jay, we realized that the UFC was about to host their 30th fight card since the pandemic hit. Imagine that, 30 fight cards between May and October. The math doesn't really make sense, but it's true. And now we've had multiple high-profile fights, title fights, without crowds, just televised. And now, in a few weeks, Conor McGregor with a cherry on top of the COVID era. So, Jay Adams, I ask you, on a personal level, as a professional, I don't know if that's a little bit of an oxymoron, right? But
well, calling me a professional is, first of all, questionable. But
how's the COVID era affected you in your professional life as a combat sports host, a commentator, a television host? How has this played into your everyday operation?
Well, thanks for the question, Mark. It's been really interesting. There's been a lot of positive and a lot of negative. We were actually keeping track with the UFC. My company, United Fight Alliance, we do the regional shows and we do international shows. We're at 212, 213, our 213th show. We just did out of Brazil, Sao Paulo. We were keeping track with the UFC, but now they've blown us out of the water because they've done all these shows during COVID and we went dark. So all of my shows, I lost my Russian show. I lost my show in Thailand, India, Romania, Ireland. A lot of my shows have gone dark. So I lost the commentating. That was a source of revenue for us, was the commentating. And the travel and the fun. And also, we're doing other business at these shows. There's a lot of networking that goes on. So you're creating future revenue and future shows at the current show. So that was a huge hit for us. But that being said, our networks, NBC Sports Network, we have a lot of CW affiliates, ABC affiliates. We're partnered with Stadium, which is owned by Sinclair Media Group, the largest broadcasting group in the country. They all came to us and said, hey, basketball's down, baseball's down, football's down. We have these big holes in our calendar. Can you put something together for us? And fortunately, I had my prior company, Fight Zone, which is still my company with Al Martino. We have about 140 shows in the can there, and my 200 plus United Fight Alliance. I said, I have a huge library. They said, get it to us. So we literally 4X'd our calendar. We went from 60 shows a month to 260 shows a month now for 10 months. So it's been a financial boon for us in that regard. And so it's kind of it's a weird space. Now, all that being said, would I like to go back to the old days? Absolutely. I missed the live events. And I'm going to backtrack and join you in the kudos for Dana White, because he was the only one out there saying this can be done. Everybody else went into their cave. Everybody went into their cave. And he said, no, this can be done. I will figure it out. And like you said, man, he was kind of the point. He was like the arrow point, right? Getting the beachhead for all the other sports, showing us so he modeled how to do it. He had a lot of money to do it. That's always helpful, right? Money helps.
They spent a lot doing it, especially in Abu Dhabi.
Yes, they did. So he put his money where his mouth was in terms of the sport. So huge credit to Dana. So my long-winded answer as to how it's affected me personally, I really miss doing live shows. I miss the audience. I miss the live commentating. I miss the travel, going to these fun locations. So I really miss that, and I miss being with my friends. But it's been great being with the family, and my wife has loved, the revenue from the syndication and licensing on the calendar,
It's interesting how the COVID era has obviously affected millions of people in our country and obviously around the world in such a negative way. But on the other side of the coin, it's so mind-blowing how people in the television industries, Netflix industries, all these different content industries really have, and I say this I don't mean to say this in a way that would hurt anyone's feelings, because millions of people are affected by this virus. I have an entire family in Charlotte. They all have it right now. And one of them is my grandmother. So, hopefully everyone's going to be okay.
Oh, man.
But it's just insane how people in those spaces of content creation are seriously benefiting. I mean, you have YouTube creators who are collecting $10 million this year that collected nothing last year. So,
wow.
It's incredible. I mean, it's not something you'd ever wish at all. But somehow just the course of nature of people being at home and needing content to stay sane and to stay active and busy.
And you know what, Mark? Thank goodness for high tech, because high tech has allowed us to have interfaces that we can use where we can actually commentate and produce virtually. And that has been super helpful. And what's great about the virtual hosting is you can still put out content. You can still have a good looking show. It actually helps the promoter a little bit because he doesn't have to fly everyone to the location. He or she can still be safe at the venue and still produce a really high-end show with only 20 or 30 people inside the venue. And yet we can still get our content and keep our television networks happy. So, high tech, and also obviously all the platforms that, the common one that, everybody uses is Zoom. And so, my kids can still go to school and still get an education. They can still virtually play, like my son, has Fortnite. I don't know what my son...
Speaking of Zoom, listen to this. How in the world did Skype have a 20-year head start and screw this one up? How did Skype...
They are the blockbuster. They are the blockbuster of...
They are the blockbuster. That's a great analogy. They screwed this one up royally. They had a 20-year head start. And as soon as everyone had to do video conferencing, because everyone in the world had Skype, I have never heard of Zoom in my life. And somehow, some way... Whoever it is at Zoom is a genius, except for the technical issues where people were getting hacked at first. I don't know if you heard about that, but it was a little bit of a weak security where people were hacking into getting.
I did hear about that.
Yeah, there was a little bit of some security issues, but I'm sure that they probably ironed most of that out. But Skype, man, shame on you.
Yeah.
Shame on you.
They had that huge watermark, which was kind of obnoxious.
Big time.
You know what I mean? And then they had, and the degradation by the time the signal went out, the picture was pretty junky. You really couldn't use that for broadcast.
Okay.
There's a lot of leeway, right? Like there's a lot of leeway because the networks understand we're all trying to do what we can with what we have. So they're letting some stuff go on. You could watch ESPN. You're talking about ESPN. You can watch Fox. You can watch all the big boys, and you'll see in CNN or whoever else. You'll see in the squeezes when they're interviewing someone on the field, they're using their phone or they're using something, and it's pretty degraded signal. But Skype's was even worse than that. So yeah, I'm with you. How do you have that kind of a head start, right? And somehow still lose the race?
Didn't Blockbuster get an offer to buy Netflix?
Yeah, so
and they turned it down.
That is such a, it's funny you brought that up because when you were asking me about the, the pay-per-view and the numbers all going up, you know what thought came to my mind? Back in the day, you and I could go to Blockbuster and for $4, we could watch a top UFC card. You could get a VHS tape and watch an insane card, 16 to 20 fights for $4. And so when we're talking now about, these numbers, $70 and then $20 and then the $5 per, you'd be on 3 platforms to watch the card. If you watch 4 pay-per-views, you're at like $600 or $700 for the year with all the platforms you have to subscribe to versus $4 a card back in the day. So,
How about this one? In 1974, Rumble in the Jungle, which I know you're very familiar with, that drew 50 million buys worldwide. Imagine 50 million buys at $70.
Wow. Oh, my God.
That's Dana White's retirement plan right there.
No kidding.
That is insane. So, I mean, and that was, I think it was $10 at the time. If my memory serves me correct with my research, I believe it was $10 a buy at that time. Now we're at 70.
Amazing.
So everything goes up except for one thing. our salaries. That's the only thing that stays the same. I make the same money I made when I was born, but everything's just more expensive.
Yeah, but you're doing what you love to do, and you're around people you love to be around, and you're growing. You're growing your platform. You're growing your content. You're doing everything right. Great brand.
So as far as COVID goes for me, honestly, I have to just admit it took me out of my element. Producing talk shows from my home was a very tough thing for me to do. I'll just be straight and honest and open about it. Recording a show from home when you're used to being in a 6-figure studio every single day was a very, very tough ask. And now I did it and I pulled it off as well as I could, but not being in your element was probably the story for me during COVID. As much as the hunger was there, as much as I knew that I needed to push forward, it was just a really tough thing to be out of my element, not in a studio doing the show at the highest level possible. And I think that they call that being jaded. And when you look at guys on ESPN who were in their bedrooms this year doing shows for ESPN, it's kind of hard for me to look myself in the eye and not think that that's just an ego. So with that said, I think I'd be prepared for the next one. Maybe I needed to just vent it and get it out a little bit. But if this happens again and we are on a serious lockdown, I'm just going to have to bite the bullet. I'm going to have to produce my show from the luxury of my room, just like the big guys are now. It's ego. I'm just saying it like it is. It's ego to say I'm out of my element just because I'm not in a major studio doing the show. You work directly with NBC Sports on a daily basis. You have plenty of shows on there. And if you don't mind me putting some of your business out there, I know you do a lot of your work right from home. So I have to look at people like you and realize, look, it's not about where you are. It's about what you are and what you're doing. It's about the content, the creation, touching people in with your words and getting them their thoughts, provoke their thoughts. That's what it's about. And I have to just remind myself that it's not about the bells and whistles. It's not about the great lighting. That's not that stuff is great. But you look at Ariel Helwani. He hasn't left his house this year in terms of doing his show. And he's pretty much, I don't know if this is still valid or if it's still, because it's been so many years, but Ariel's probably still like the top name in like MMA journalism. I don't even know what that means anymore.
A couple of days ago, he won yet again, another year. This is a repeat win. Best journalist.
It's like 9 years in a row.
Fighters only, yeah, and that's the big award show in Vegas. We'll carry that. We carry that on our network. It's a very highly produced show. It's probably the best award a journalist can get in the MMA space. Right. And he won it again, and he gets it like that. To me, I have no problem saying he's the man. Like he's the man.
He was I compare him to just getting to the water before everybody. I mean, he was there. He was just there before everyone, and he stuck to it. And I think that's really important to stick to something that you've been doing for a long time, because that the longevity, the seniority, the tenure, all of that stuff becomes extremely valuable as you progress. We could do this forever, but we do have to step aside. Jay, go ahead. I know you have a point.
Oh, no, I was just going to really quickly say I'm learning from you all of the things you have to do in the non-linear space, in the digital space. I'm an old horse. I'm being brought to a new pond here because up until now, it's always been in a studio with a crew, taking care of cameras, taking care of headsets, taking care of microphones. Now I'm in my office. I've got to learn. You have to be a one-man show. And you were like you said, he got there early and he stuck with it. You're one of those guys who got there early and stuck with it. And you do all the search engine stuff and all the IT and you're a one-man band essentially. I know you have a great crew here, but when you're at your house, you're putting out a really highly produced product. And I'm late to the show in that regard. And I'm in my office trying to learn this stuff, and it's nervous doing live. I'm nervous because I'm the only one. I'm doing graphics. I'm doing lower thirds. I'm doing the microphones. I'm doing the cameras. Oh, by the way, you have to interview like a big celebrity.
Right. By the way, right. And all of these little things can go wrong, and people like you and I, Those tiny little things are extremely important. We're going to step aside for a short one. We'll come back. We have 2 more segments. He's Jay Adams. I'm Marc Charles. Thanks to Joe Butler, our producer right here at GLH Studios. We're listening live on Money Talk Radio. You're listening and watching the Octagram, depending on the platform. Welcome. I'm Marc Charles Jay Adams in studio with me here at GLH in Tampa, Florida, right here in Ybor City. You're listening on Money Talk 1010. This is the Octagram. Jay, some serious business we have to get into here. Stuff that's a little bit above my pay grade, but I'm still going to get into it. How is this new presidential regime going to affect our industry, and specifically the UFC?
The word is fundamentally, foundationally. It will rock the UFC, despite Dana White going up there and going, I don't really care. I've got to negotiate with someone. The fighters would be much better off if I was negotiating directly with them rather than, a third party. That's kind of his party line that he says publicly is I don't care. But if you look at his actions behind the scenes, he fights any kind of unionization virulently with every ounce of strength and power and political ability that he has.
Yes. And one of the things about that, going public is a huge problem for Dana White. It's a great thing for the UFC. It's a great thing for William Morris. But if Dana White was to have to answer to shareholders on a regular basis, some of the things that has created the success, because everybody understands that Dana White's tenacity, his aggressiveness, all of those things are why the UFC is where it is today. So shareholders would be a problem for him, and I think that's pretty obvious. But what's going to be a even more of a problem possibly for him in the UFC is going to be this new presidential regime. Not specifically Joe Biden, but Joe Biden appointing Andrew Yang.
Oh.
And Andrew Yang, I mean, if you just look at his website, it is just flossed with why MMA fighters need rights. And I mean, he has an entire page on his site about the Ali Act and how he wants MMA fighters to have rights and to get paid right. Just a quick number here. Most pro sports are close to a 50-50 revenue split.
That's right.
UFC is closer to the 10 to 18% split. And that came out after some information was revealed during this lawsuit that's going on, which is a whole other month worth of content that we're going to have to eventually get into. So 10 to 18% of a profit split with the athletes, I think that's where the source of the issue is right there. If that number was closer to 40 or 50%, I don't think we would have such a problem. People are always going to be greedy and people are always going to want more. But that number compared to other professional sports, I think that's a bit of a red flag. Yeah,
this is the dissonance that Dana White puts out there. And when all the dust settles, when the class action suit that was filed in 2014, it's a class action suits take forever, but when that finally, hits the courts, and when the unionization finally becomes on the front burner, he's going to have to make some fundamental decisions. He's the first guy to say, and he's been doing this for 10 years, we're just as big as the NFL. We're just as big as the NBA. We're just as big as Major League Baseball, if not bigger. Okay. So you're saying you're a professional sport, you're getting the professional revenues, you were on Fox forever, now you're on ESPN. All right, world-class sport. We get it. Now how about some world-class pay for the fighters who have to bring a whole camp to the Institute? They might make $12,000 for the fight, and they got to bring their whole camp to the Institute, and you're going to walk away with $7 million at the end of the pay-per-view, which they're not going to get a piece of. Hey, but they got a knockout bonus. We gave them $40,000. It's when the curtain Joe, which was here in between episodes, and he said when the curtain was pulled back, and I saw what was really going on. When you see what the money is, then a Ford Mustang for submission of the night, a $25,000 Ford Mustang, it ain't gonna get it. It ain't gonna get it anymore. And when they start getting the big names, when they start realizing, in the big names, you might make $100,000. When they realize that should have been, if they had a rev share, that should have been 1.2 million. Then that $100,000 starts becoming insulting. And you might say, hey, they got $100,000 for a fight. They're risking their life. They're risking their livelihood. They're risking their vision. They're risking, a serious back injury, life debilitating injuries.
It could be the last night they ever work.
That's right. And here's the other thing, Mark. If you're going to say, hey, we're the big leagues and you're a gigger, you are a part-timer, you're not an employee. So then you can't tell if I'm a gigger, right? And I've been a gigger.
Oh, you're an independent contractor.
If I'm an independent contractor,
you're responsible.
If I'm a gigger, then you can't tell me when to fight. You can't tell me where to fight. You can't tell me who to fight because I'm a free agent. You already told me I'm not an employee, right? You told me I'm not your employee.
Devil's advocate, if I may.
Sure.
You're not an employee, but you've signed a contract with certain clauses in it. So I might not be an employee of yours, but if we agree on something and we sign a contract, there's clauses in there. I'm not your employee, but we've agreed on a contract.
100%.
So there is some validity
100%.
to signing. Now
that's why a fighter needs a heavy cat when you're sitting down to negotiate.
That's what I was going to say. It's irresponsible people who are very hungry to get into the UFC. They sign a 6-fight contract for $12,500 each fight. And now you're in
it's stardust.
You end up in your second and third year in the UFC, and you might even be in the rankings, and you're making $12,500 to show up, $12,500, and your camp costs you $8,000.
Where do you think the first place Dana brings the new 20-year-old fighter who's 9-0 and he's a prospect? Where do you think he brings that fighter to get the twinkle dust going? The Institute.
Right.
On the 215. Bring him to the Fighters Institute and boom, there's all the pictures and the belts and the high tech.
Show him that hot girl with the skirt lifted up just
totally. And you bring him there in a limo and you get him to sign that deal. But I agree with you. Your devil's advocate point is well taken. If I sign that contract to those 8 fights and in the clause, if I get hurt, the contract freezes. It's not like it keeps going. So the contract freezes and I start right off to ground one again when I'm back up. You know what I mean?
And then it's up to Dana White and his staff if they're going to let you work for another company. Even though you're hurt, you're still under contract. And it's up to them at that point. Can you commentate over there? Can you, you're injured, so you're not fighting, but can you do other things outside of the company? So it is a very tough place to be in. I think that one of the things that are important is for the athletes to have better business guidance. Possibly people do a lot of consulting in a lot of areas. I think a really good consulting company could be for MMA fighters who are getting into that upper echelon of their career so that they know how to handle their money, how to negotiate their contracts, and not just hire a manager, but before you hire the manager, have a good understanding of things. And that way, when your manager goes out and negotiates for you, your communication line with him isn't, I'm just this race dog and you're going to basically treat me like a race dog or a horse. No, I'm not a racehorse. I'm a talent, and I'm also smart, and I know my business. I'm going to have you negotiate for me, but here's what we need, and here's why, because I learned my stuff, and now I know what needs to be done. So a little bit vague in general, but there could be maybe a management company, maybe a legal firm or someone who gets into that game, and maybe it's more of a private. Maybe they're not on Facebook. They don't have a Facebook page, but they're reaching out to UFC fighters who've been on TV for years and like, hey, look, you have a lot of potential. You could do a lot better business wise. Let's talk. Let's consult. So I think
before that 8 contract deal is signed, that's when they need to have that consult. And let's be as balanced as we can here. If you go to the UFC Fight Institute, it's not just gorgeous and it's not just used to get the stardust in the young kids' eyes. It is 100% used for that. But they also have financial classes for you to not blow your money, your $12,000 you made for your first fight, not to blow all that money.
Right.
So, okay, props there. They're going to have nutritionists. They're going to have medical doctors to help you, with anything that ails you. There'll be, classes. So there's a lot of good, and it's a good vibe. And plus, to the UFC's credit, they have the retreats, and that's when all the fighters are all in one place at all time. And that's dangerous for the UFC.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That's dangerous.
Because the retreat that they had, which is, I think, a good 3, maybe 4 years
2017,
ago.
I believe.
So we're going on 4 years.
Maybe 2016, yeah.
It was right, yeah. So that was the last time that I heard of them having any kind of business guidance.
Well, you know what happened? You remember Leslie Smith, the fighter who's advocating for union. She asked Kobe Bryant, how the union has helped him in his negotiations, and it was like, oh, Ixnay, stop the. And of course, Colby's like,
gone.
Is fundamental, right? And of course, she's all of a sudden not in the UFC anymore, and she had won her last couple of fights and hadn't lost a fight, and she didn't screw up her fight. Her opponent didn't make weight. That's why, and then they cut her. They paid her for the fight, and they said that's the only legal obligation we have to you. And she says no because of the coverage, because I could have had a knockout that would make you guys want to sign me for 4 more fights. So there's a lot of intangibles, and that's exactly to your point. When you have someone who knows the game in your corner before you sign that 8-fight or 6-fight deal, before you sign that, and they can maybe not include some of those clauses. I don't know, though. It's a tough situation because they're the big dog.
Right. They call the shots in a lot of cases, especially like if you're new and you're coming up from Contender Series, you're not going to have this negotiation power that we're implying here. Obviously, you have, there's levels and degrees of buying power, negotiation power, and all, all of that. But the UFC is going to call the shots on those young guys.
Yep.
They're going to say, hey, look, this is the contract, this is the deal, this is how it is. Maybe it's that second contract that, you want to make sure that you're not setting yourself up for, years 4, 5, and 6, or wherever you are to just be unfortunate. Look at some of Conor McGregor's opponents in the last few years. Some of them made $40,000 fighting Conor McGregor. $40,000 fighting Conor McGregor when Conor McGregor was going home with millions of dollars. And that's good on Conor. Good for him. He's obviously a shrewd businessman.
Yes.
And he does an extremely, really good job. I'm sure his manager, Audie, is a big player in all of that. But you just have to feel bad for some of those guys. For them not to even have the power to negotiate a new contract when you're going to fight the biggest name in the industry is a bit sad. And it's a bit sad that, well, I digress. I can't say that because we've heard stories about Dana White giving Daniel Cormier, after he lost his belt to John Jones, they gave Daniel Cormier $1 million off the record. The Fertittas and Dana White gave Daniel Cormier $1 million off the record. Not salary, wasn't a fight bonus. It was just, hey, we love you. You've done this. We know what you've done for us. Whatever the case is, they love the man. They gave him $1 million. So, and that was years ago. It was 4 or 5 years ago, however many years ago that was. So it's hard for me to sit here and say that they're not taking care of people on the back end. I don't know that for sure. So there's a good chance that, Eddie Alvarez made some really nice money off the record on the back end because he fought Conor McGregor. And that's what I would hope.
Yeah, you had guys like Chuck Liddell and Matt Hughes. They got the golden parachutes. They got the office. Here's an office in the title. You're a VP.
Chuck,
what am I a VP Liddell, of?
Chuck, you drink the company beers. That's your job. He drinks the company beers.
Did you ever see that interview with him? It was like a local affiliate interview him, and he fell asleep in the middle of the interview.
Yes.
Oh, it's the funniest one ever.
God.
Russian. For whoever's listening to us, don't leave this show, but when this show is done, go to YouTube and pull up Sleepy Chuck Liddell.
Oh,
it is hilarious.
Chuck Liddell. What a legendary man. But yeah, speaking of the only guys that ever really made it past is Forrest Griffin. The 3 guys they hired, Matt Hughes, Chuck Liddell, Forrest Griffin, the 3 retired guys that they wanted to,
take care of,
keep them happy. Forrest Griffin, which was the kind of the black sheep of them all, not the huge star, was the one that was just busting his butt, and till this day busting his butt, and
he has a legitimate job at the Institute. Yeah, he actually really contributes to the bottom line.
Yeah. Jay Adams, we have to wrap up. It's awesome having you here. I'm pretty sure it won't be the last time. I'm sure we'll be here in 2021 doing some of these awesome shows. I want to wish everybody a happy new year. Thank you to our producer, Joe Butler, JLH Studios. Of course, we are live on Money Talk Radio, and this is the Octagram. Jay Adams.
Thanks again, Mark. And thanks to JB behind us there, kicking it. And thanks for having me. 2021 is going to be a whole different year, folks.
That's right. Happy New Year's. And is it Happy New Year or Happy New Year's?
I think both will work.